My name is Naomi Richardson. I'm 49 years old, and when my husband heard the doctors say I had only 3 days left, he held my hand, smiled, and said, "Finally, only 3 days, your house and your money are mine now." I opened my eyes in that hospital room and I knew something had changed. The change wasn't in the room itself. God knows I'd made sure the VIP wing of my own medical center was outfitted with every luxury money could buy. No, the change was in the air I breathed. Heavy, fleeting, like the haze that settles over a marsh right before a storm. It was in the way the staff moved around me, faster, quieter, with this suppressed sympathy in their eyes that made my skin crawl. But most of all, it was in the way I heard Chief of Staff Dr. Isaiah Webb talking to my husband Julian just outside my door. My own medical knowledge I'd acquired through building my hospital empire from the ground up, told me there was no hope left. That was the change. The facade of medical possibility had finally fallen. Welcome to Revenge Sparkle. I share real-life revenge stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Now let's get back to my story. Trust me, you'll want to stick around till the end. Because what I did in those final 3 days, it destroyed the man who tried to destroy me. I closed my eyelids to just a narrow slit. It's an old business negotiation trick I'd perfected over decades, when you want to hear what's really being said while others think you're distracted or oblivious. The sedatives they claimed to give me numbed my body, sure, but not my mind. My mind was functioning with this diamond-like clarity. You know that clarity that comes right before something's about to shatter? That's exactly what it felt like. And then I heard Dr. Webb's voice. He sounded tired, guarded. He was an excellent doctor, but he usually saw me not as a patient, but as his boss, his employer, the woman who signed his paychecks. But now he sounded human, almost broken. "Julian Garrett," he said, and I could hear the weight in every word. "I have to be honest with you. Naomi's condition is critical. The liver failure is progressing despite everything we've tried. Her organs are failing one by one. We're doing everything possible, but maximum 3 days, maybe less. I am so sorry." Silence. A silence that roared in my ears like a freight train. It was the silence of a death sentence, signed by the biology of my own failing body, but delivered by another man's hand. 3 days. I felt my heart still beating in my chest, steady, strong, refusing to accept what my mind already knew. 3 days meant the doctors were finally admitting what I'd been feeling since last week. My body was failing, shutting down, giving up. 49 years old. A massive empire of medical centers stretching across Georgia, commercial properties in downtown Atlanta worth tens of millions, bank accounts that would make most people's heads spin, a life I'd built through iron discipline, through sleepless nights, through the hard lessons of a failed first marriage and starting over from scratch. And now? 3 days. I thought about the past 20 years of my life. My first marriage had ended, no children, just the business. I built, I expanded, I acquired. Everything I owned, every single dollar in those accounts, I had earned myself. Long before Julian ever stepped into my life, my fortune was my shield, my armor, the proof that I didn't need anyone. But at 46, I suddenly realized something that terrified me. The house was empty. The evenings seemed endless. I'd come home after 14-hour days at the hospital and there was no one there. No one to talk to, no one to share a meal with. Just silence and success and this aching loneliness that money couldn't fix. Julian Garrett stepped into that void like he was made for it. A good-looking man, 10 years younger than me, attentive, charming. He worked as an administrator at one of my hospitals, not high up enough to threaten me, but competent enough to impress me. When he first asked me out to dinner, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like a young woman again, like someone desirable, like someone worth pursuing for more than just my bank account. He reignited a light in me that I thought had gone out forever. I needed that warmth so desperately, that I didn't want to see the cold shadows lurking in his eyes. I didn't want to see that the smile never quite reached those eyes. I didn't want to see that his affection always seemed to spike right around the time I mentioned a new property acquisition or a successful quarter. I was a fool. A desperate, lonely fool. The door to my hospital room opened, and I didn't stir. I kept my breathing shallow and even, my body perfectly relaxed like someone deep under sedation. Julian walked in. I caught the scent of his expensive cologne, the one I'd given him for his birthday last year, Tom Ford Noir. It had cost me nearly $400, and he'd kissed me and told me I had exquisite taste. Now that scent made my stomach turn. It smelled sickeningly sweet, like rotting flowers. He sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress dipped slightly under his weight, and then he took my hand. His fingers were warm, well manicured. I'd paid for those manicures, paid for his gym membership, paid for his car, paid for everything that made him the polished, attractive man he appeared to be. My breathing grew shallow, but not from the medication. From rage, from horror, from anticipation of what I somehow knew was coming. I felt every muscle in my body tense internally while outwardly I kept up the perfect relaxation of a sedated patient. He believed I was unconscious. The nurses had told him so this morning. They'd assured him the strong medication would keep me out for hours. What happened next? I will remember it until my last breath, however long or short that might be. Julian squeezed my palm, stroked my wrist with his thumb in what might have looked like a tender gesture to anyone watching, and then he whispered, almost tenderly, with this icy hardness underneath that made my blood run cold, "Finally." That single word, finally. I've waited for this for so long, 3 years of waiting, Naomi, 3 years of patience. My heart stopped. Or at least it felt like it stopped. Everything inside me froze except for this white-hot rage that started building in my chest. He kept talking. His voice was low, intimate, like he was sharing a secret with a lover. But the words? The words were poison. 3 years of waking up every morning to look at that cold, busy face, holding this hand, touching this body whose only worth was the money it controlled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip my hand away and claw his eyes out, but I couldn't move. I couldn't let him know I could hear every single word of this confession, because that's what it was, a confession. The kind a murderer makes when they think their victim can no longer hear them. I tensed inside, but my body didn't betray me. I lay there like a stone, a perfect image of calm, while a storm of horror and rage raged inside me like nothing I'd ever felt before. "Your house, your millions," Julian continued, and there was this emphasis in his voice I had never heard before. It wasn't love, it wasn't care, it wasn't even neutral respect, it was pure, unfiltered scorn, contempt, triumph. "It all belongs to me now. 3 whole years. For 3 years, I've played a role, Naomi. Listening to your moral lectures about business ethics and responsibility, smiling at your boring friends with their boring stories, lying in bed with you and pretending I felt something other than disgust. Each word was a knife, each sentence cut deeper. 3 years of contempt, hidden behind expensive cologne and purchased attention. Do you know how much I hated you, Evelyn? Your arrogance, your know-it-all attitude, the way you talked down to everyone like you were better than them just because you had money." He called me Evelyn, my middle name, the name he used when he was being playful, intimate. Now it sounded like an insult. "You thought you bought me, didn't you? A young, handsome man for your empty life. A trophy husband to fill your lonely house. But I had a much better plan, darling. A much better plan." Julian laughed. It was soft, quiet, but it was the ugliest sound I'd ever heard. A grating, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. He leaned closer, and I smelled something else beneath the cologne. Alcohol. The slight hint of bourbon he often drank in the mornings when he thought I wasn't paying attention. A sign of his internal emptiness, his moral bankruptcy. "And now it's finally over," he whispered, his breath warm against my face. "The tea was a masterpiece, Naomi. An absolute masterpiece. A minimal dose every day. So subtle, so slow, so perfectly calculated." My mind reeled. The tea. The tea he made for me every morning. The special blend he said would help with my stress. The tea I drank faithfully every single day, because my husband made it for me with his own hands and told me he loved me. He poisoned me. Every morning, every single morning for months. "They blamed it on stress," Julian continued, and I could hear the pride in his voice. The sick, twisted pride. "On overwork, on your age. Poor Naomi, working herself to death. Poor Naomi, burning the candle at both ends. No one suspected a thing. A perfectly executed plan. You will die, and I will inherit everything you worked so hard for. Everything you sacrificed for. Every property, every account, every share of stock, all of it mine. And, you know the best part?" He squeezed my hand tighter. "No one will ever find out. The drug breaks down in the system. By the time you're dead, there'll be nothing left to find. Just another middle-aged woman who worked too hard and paid the price." He stood up, released my fingers like he was discarding trash, adjusted the blanket over me with this feigned concern that made me want to vomit. And then he walked out. I heard him in the hallway, talking to someone. Probably the nurse. His voice completely different now, compassionate, distraught, the voice of a devoted husband watching his beloved wife slip away. "Please take good care of her," he said, and I heard actual tears in his voice. Fake tears. Practice tears. "I'll be back soon. I need a moment. This is so hard." The perfect performance, right up to the last second. When the door closed behind him, I opened my eyes. The ceiling blurred above me, but not from weakness, from rage, from a fury so hot it coursed through my veins like liquid fire, because everything that had happened over the past few months suddenly clicked into a clear, horrible picture. The gradual deterioration of my health. It had started subtle, first just slight nausea in the mornings, then weakness, dizziness, headaches that wouldn't go away, no matter how much medication I took. The doctors blamed it on stress, on overwork. I'd thought so too. I was running 4 medical centers, overseeing 2 major property developments, sitting on 3 different boards. Of course I was stressed, of course I was exhausted, but then it got worse. 3 weeks ago, I had an episode right in my office. I was in a meeting with investors when suddenly the room started spinning. I couldn't catch my breath. My assistant called 911 and they brought me here, to my own hospital, where my own doctors ran tests and looked at me with these grave, concerned faces. My blood counts showed strange abnormalities. Liver enzymes through the roof, kidney function declining. Systems shutting down one by one for no apparent reason. But here's the thing about me. I didn't trust anyone, not completely, not even my own doctors. Maybe especially not my own doctors, because I knew how hospitals worked. I knew how easy it was to miss things, to make assumptions, to overlook the unlikely in favor of the obvious. So I did something they didn't know about. I secretly sent a blood sample to an outside lab, a place in Charlotte where I had connections, where they owed me favors, where they would run a full toxicology panel without asking questions. The results came back 5 days ago, while I was lying here in this bed, getting weaker by the day. The toxicological analysis detected traces of a substance that shouldn't have been there, a rare drug used in palliative medicine to ease the suffering of the terminally ill. In small doses, it causes drowsiness, confusion, a general malaise. In large doses, administered consistently over time, it causes liver failure, kidney failure, complete organ shutdown. I hadn't wanted to believe it. Even seeing it there in black and white, part of me refused to accept what it meant. I told myself it must be a lab error, a contaminated sample, something, anything other than the obvious conclusion. I requested a repeat analysis, sent another sample through a different contact at a different facility. The second analysis confirmed it. And now, after Julian's words, after his confession, there was no doubt left. None. I had been systematically poisoned for months, by my husband, the man I'd trusted, the man I'd loved, the man I'd welcomed into my bed, and my life, and my heart. He murdered me, was murdering me. Would complete the murder in 3 days unless I did something about it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. But here's what Julian didn't understand about me. Here's what he'd miscalculated in his perfect plan. I didn't build a multi-million-dollar empire by giving up when things got hard. I didn't survive a brutal divorce and a male-dominated industry and countless people trying to tear me down by being weak. And I sure as hell wasn't going to die before I took everything from him. Everything he'd murdered me for. The rage transformed, crystallized, became something cold and calculated and absolutely lethal. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't obey. My hands trembled. The poison had done its work too well. I was weak, dying, but my mind was sharp as a blade. 3 days. If the doctors were right, I had 3 days left. 3 days to put everything in order. 3 days to make sure Julian Garrett didn't get one single penny of what he'd killed me for. I knew Julian. Knew him better than he thought I did. He was handsome, charming, and internally empty. A hollow man playing at being whole. I'd thought a comfortable life would be enough for him. Thought that love and security and stability would fill whatever void existed inside him. How foolish I'd been. How stupid and naive and blind. He didn't want comfort. He wanted everything. He wanted my empire, my legacy, my life's work, and he'd been willing to murder me for it, slowly and methodically, while pretending to love me. But he'd underestimated one crucial thing. He'd underestimated how sharp my mind remained even as my body failed. How strategic, how ruthless I could be when backed into a corner. I needed help. But I couldn't go to my usual circle, my lawyers, my business associates, my friends. They all knew Julian. He'd spent 3 years charming them, positioning himself as my devoted husband. If I reached out to them, he'd hear about it. He'd find a way to block me, to discredit me, to paint me as a dying woman not in her right mind. No, I needed an outsider, someone invisible, someone with no ties to my old life, someone Julian would never think to watch or bribe or intimidate. I slowly turned my head toward the door, and that's when I heard it, water splashing in the hallway. The scrape of a mop against linoleum, the quiet, rhythmic sounds of manual labor that rich people learn not to hear. I called out softly, my voice rough and weaker than I wanted it to be. "Miss? Could you come here, please?" The noise stopped. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the door opened a crack and a young woman peered in. She was petite, black, dark hair pulled back into a practical bun at the base of her neck. Her face was plain, friendly, without makeup. She wore the shapeless uniform of the hospital's cleaning staff, pale blue scrubs that had been washed so many times they'd faded almost to white. I'd seen her before, seen her wiping down floors in the hallway, changing linens, emptying trash, hard, thankless work that I'd probably never properly acknowledged because people like me don't see people like her. We look right through them. But now I saw her, really saw her. And what I saw was fatigue deep in her eyes, but also something else. A suppressed strength. A toughness that came from life pushing you into corners over and over again and having to fight your way out. "Are you feeling unwell?" she asked, stepping closer with genuine concern on her face. She smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp cloth and hard work. "I'll call the nurse immediately." "No need." I forced myself to speak clearly, to put command in my voice, even though it cost me. "What is your name?" "Destiny. Destiny Hayes, ma'am." "Destiny." I looked into her eyes, held her gaze. "Close that door. I need your help." Confusion flickered across her face. Her eyes widened slightly, but something in my expression made her obey. She closed the door carefully, quietly, and came closer to the bed. Are you okay?" she asked, looking at my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Do you need a doctor?" "I'm fully conscious," I said, and I saw her start with surprise. "And I need you to do something for me. Something very important. Do not tell anyone I am lucid, not my husband, not the doctors, not anyone. Do you understand?" She started shaking her head, her hands beginning to fidget with the hem of her scrubs. I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of losing her job. Fear of getting involved in something beyond her understanding. "I can't do that," she said quickly. "That's not my job. If they find out if anyone knows if you do everything I say," I interrupted her, pausing to gather my strength because even this much talking was exhausting. "You will receive enough money to never work as a cleaning woman again. Never mop strangers' floors again. Never empty another bedpan or scrub another toilet. I mean it, Destiny, life-changing money." I watched her face carefully. Watched hope and desperation war with fear and disbelief. "I know you have debt," I continued, "because I'd built my empire on knowing things about people, on seeing what others missed. I know you cared for your grandmother until her last breath and you're still paying off those nursing home costs. I know your pantry is empty more often than it's full. I know you work double shifts just to keep your head above water." Her eyes filled with tears. I'd hit the mark. Sometimes when you've been desperate yourself, you recognize it in others. This amount I'm talking about will pay off all of that and more. You'll never have to worry about money again. Never have to choose between groceries and rent. Never have to work yourself to exhaustion just to survive. But you have to help me, right now, before it's too late. You're serious about this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't some kind of, you're really serious?" "Absolutely." I held her gaze. "But we have very little time. I need you to do something for me right now. In my nightstand, there's my cell phone. Find the contact for Malcolm Sterling, call him. Tell him Naomi Richardson needs him to come immediately. Tell him it's a personal matter, urgent. Do you understand?" Destiny stared at me for a long moment. I could see her mind working, weighing the risk against the reward, the fear against the desperate hope. Finally, she hurried to the nightstand and took out my phone. It was the latest iPhone, heavy and sleek in her rough, work-worn hands. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through my contacts. She found Malcolm Sterling's name and pressed call. I heard the phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times, my heart pounded. What if he didn't answer? What if? Malcolm Sterling. His voice was crisp, professional, impatient, a busy lawyer's voice. Destiny swallowed hard. Mr. Sterling, excuse me. I'm calling from the hospital, from Naomi Richardson. She asks you to come urgently. I couldn't hear his response, but I saw Destiny's eyes widen. Yes, she is conscious, Destiny said, sounding like she was reciting a sacred oath. She says it's a very urgent personal matter. She needs you right away. She handed the phone to me. My hand shook as I took it, but I forced my voice to be steady, strong. The voice of the woman I'd been before the poison started eating away at my strength. Malcolm, it's me, I said. I need to draw up a new will. Today, right now, come immediately, and bring a notary public with you. Not a word to anyone, do you hear me? This stays between us. Silence on the other end. I could hear Malcolm's sharp intake of breath. Malcolm, I'm being murdered, I said flatly. My husband has been poisoning me for months. I have maybe 3 days left. This is my last chance to secure my revenge. My last chance to make sure he doesn't get what he killed me for. So I need you here. Now. Another beat of silence. Then Malcolm's voice, metallic and hard. I'm on my way. I'll be there in an hour. I'll bring everything necessary. Don't speak to anyone else until I arrive. Thank you. I handed the phone back to Destiny. Now just wait here and be quiet. When he arrives, you stay as a witness. That's all you have to do. Just be here and witness what happens. Can you do that? But why me? Destiny asked, and her voice cracked with the weight of what was happening. Why do you trust me? You don't even know me. I smiled. It was a weak smile, but it carried all the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. Because you are an outsider, Destiny. You are not part of my circle. You don't run in my social groups. You don't attend my charity functions. You don't know my business associates. My husband cannot buy you because he doesn't even know you exist. He cannot intimidate you because you have nothing he can threaten. You are invisible to him, uninteresting. Beneath his notice, I paused, catching my breath. And I need you exactly as you are, pure, desperate enough to be brave, ready to seize an opportunity when it's offered. You remind me of myself 30 years ago, Destiny. Before I had money, when I was hungry and angry and willing to do whatever it took to survive. That's who I need right now, not my polished, comfortable friends who've forgotten what it's like to fight. I need someone who still has that fire. Destiny sank into the chair by the wall. I could see she was overwhelmed, horrified, but also excited. Terrified and excited at the same time. The realization that she held a wealthy woman's life and future in her hands was almost too much for her to process. I closed my eyes and gathered what little strength I had left. 1 hour. I had to hold on for 1 hour. Inside my head, I kept repeating Julian's words. His hateful, triumphant, cruel words. Finally, your house and your money are mine now. Those words were my fuel. They fed the rage that kept me conscious, kept me fighting, kept me from just slipping away into the darkness that kept trying to pull me under. The time passed agonizingly slowly. I watched the light outside my window change as dusk settled over Atlanta. The October day was ending early, the way they do when winter is coming. The hospital light shone cold and relentless, that particular fluorescent white that makes everything look washed out and unreal. Destiny sat silently in her chair. Occasionally she would glance at me, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening, like any moment she'd wake up, and it would all have been a dream. I didn't blame her. I could barely believe it myself. 24 hours ago, I'd been lying here thinking I was dying of natural causes, tragic but inevitable. Now I knew the truth. Now I was dying of murder, and I was going to make damn sure my murderer paid for it. Exactly 1 hour after the phone call, my door opened. Malcolm Sterling stepped in, and I've never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. He was 52 years old, fit, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Destiny made in 6 months. His eyes had the sharpness of an experienced lawyer who'd seen everything and wasn't easily shocked. But he looked shocked now. Behind him came his assistant, Simone Porter, 26, brilliant, carrying a tablet and a leather portfolio and wearing the alert expression of someone ready to document everything. Malcolm's first action was to scan Destiny sitting by the wall. I saw his lawyer's mind working, assessing, calculating. Naomi Richardson, he said, approaching my bed. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. What's going on? Close the door, Malcolm. Sit down and listen carefully. I have no time for pleasantries or surprises. He nodded to Simone, who closed the door and locked it. Destiny remained by the wall, her breathing shallow, like she was afraid to move. Malcolm pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. He pulled out a small voice recorder. "May I record this?" he asked. "For legal clarity?" "Yes. I want every word documented, every single word." He pressed record and set the device on my nightstand. I told him everything. The toxicology reports I'd secretly ordered from labs in Charlotte, the traces of palliative care drugs in my blood, the systematic poisoning over months. And then I told him about what happened an hour ago, Julian's confession at my bedside, his triumphant monologue, his admission of murder. Malcolm listened without interrupting, but I watched his face grow harder with every sentence. The muscle in his jaw tightened. His hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles went white. When I finished, there was a long moment of silence. "Do you have the analysis reports?" he asked finally. His voice was steady, but I could hear the rage underneath. "Yes, in my safe at home. The code is my mother's birthday, 071952. Get them, make copies, lock the originals in your own safe." "That's the evidence," Malcolm said slowly. "That's the basis for a criminal case. We can have him arrested for attempted murder. We can." "No," I interrupted. "Not yet. First, we secure the will, because if I die before we change my will, the entire estate falls to Julian by law as my husband, all of it. Every property, every account, every single thing I've built, he inherits automatically. Legal logic must precede human revenge," Malcolm said, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Exactly. That's why I called you first. That's why we do this now, today. Before anything else." "Who do you want to leave it to?" Malcolm asked. "Your cousin in Philadelphia? A foundation? If we're doing this, we need to make it ironclad so Julian can't contest it." I turned my head slightly and indicated Destiny with a weak movement. "Her, Destiny Hayes. I want to leave everything to her." Malcolm's head whipped around to stare at the cleaning woman. Destiny looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "Everything?" she whispered. "Everything," I confirmed. "The house, the medical centers, the commercial properties, the bank accounts, the investment portfolios. Every single asset I own, it all goes to you, Destiny. And out of that inheritance, you will pay Malcolm generously for his services today. We'll include that in the will as well." "But why her?" Malcolm asked. It wasn't a challenge, it was a professional question. He needed to understand for the legal documentation. "Because she's here. Because I trust her. Because I have no time for anything else." I paused to catch my breath. "My entire estate is premarital property, Malcolm. You know that. I built everything before I married Julian. I have no children. No direct heirs. It's mine to dispose of however I wish. Draw up the will so Julian cannot contest it," I continued. "Secure it against every possible legal attack. Make it a fortress." Malcolm nodded, his mind already working through the legal strategy. "We need a notary public and a doctor to confirm your capacity to execute the will at the moment of signing. Without that, it's vulnerable to challenge. Julian will claim you were under the influence of medication, not in your right mind. Then organize it. Today, right now. I need an independent witness. Someone with no connection to me or Julian. Someone who can testify that I was lucid and understood exactly what I was doing." "All right." Malcolm turned to Simone. "Call the on-call public notary, and find an independent neurologist or psychiatrist from another hospital, Emory or Grady. Not here. They need to come immediately. Make it clear this is urgent. And Simone, make absolutely certain this doctor has no connection to Dr. Webb or anyone else on staff here." Simone nodded and stepped out into the hallway, already dialing on her phone. Malcolm turned to Destiny. His gaze was intense, measuring. "Ma'am," he said formally, "do you understand what's happening here?" Destiny shook her head. "Not entirely, it's terrifying. You will inherit the entire estate of Naomi Richardson," Malcolm said bluntly. "The house in Buckhead worth approximately $8 million. 4 medical centers with a combined value of roughly $50 million. Commercial properties in downtown Atlanta worth another $30 million. Investment accounts, savings, stocks, bonds. We're talking about a total estate value somewhere north of $100 million. Destiny's face went pale. I thought she might faint. "You will be a very rich woman," Malcolm continued. "But you will also become a target. Her husband will try to contest the will. He may try to intimidate you, bribe you, threaten you. We are talking about a man who murdered his wife for money. He will not give up easily. Are you ready for that?" The room was completely silent. I could hear Destiny's breathing, quick and shallow. "Do I have to be?" she asked finally, her voice small. Yes, Malcolm said. Because we will do everything right legally. We will build a fortress that Julian Garrett cannot break through. But psychologically, it will be a war. He will not leave you alone. You have to be strong, Destiny. Stronger than you've ever been in your life. I spoke up then, my voice weak but determined. Destiny, listen to me. I'm not asking you to be a saint. Once you have the money, you do whatever you want with it. Buy a mansion, travel the world, never work another day in your life. I don't care. But I'm asking you one thing, one promise. See this poisoning through to the end. Work with Malcolm and the police to make sure Julian goes to prison, so he doesn't kill anyone else, so he pays for what he did to me. And reward everyone who helps you, Malcolm, Simone, anyone who stands with you. Be generous, be smart, but most of all, get justice for me. Will you promise me that? Destiny looked at me with tears streaming down her face. I promise, she whispered. I promise I will seek justice for you, Miss Richardson. I swear it. Half an hour later, my hospital room had become something else entirely. It had become a courtroom. A legal fortress. The stage for my final act of revenge. The public notary arrived first. An older gentleman named Richard Crawford with a weathered briefcase and the kind of face that had witnessed 1,000 wills and trusts, and probably more human drama than he'd ever wanted to see. Then came Dr. Adrienne Chambers, a psychiatrist from Emory, a woman in her 50s with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Malcolm had briefed her on the situation, and she arrived ready to conduct a thorough capacity evaluation. The atmosphere in that room was tense, solemn, shadowed by the anticipation of death and the weight of what we were about to do. Mr. Crawford looked at me with something like respect. He understood what he was witnessing, a dying woman using her final hours to orchestrate an act of revenge from beyond the grave. Dr. Chambers approached my bed and began her examination. She was thorough, professional. She asked me question after question. What day is it, Miss Richardson? Monday, October 16th. Where are you? Richardson Medical Center, VIP Wing, Room 412. Who is the current President of the United States? I answered. She asked me to name my birth date, my mother's name, the name of my first medical center. She checked my pupils, evaluated my responses, tested my memory and cognitive function. Finally, she straightened up and made notes on an official form. Patient is oriented to time, space, and person, she said clearly for Malcolm's recording. Consciousness is clear, speech is coherent, memory is intact, reasoning ability is unimpaired. In my professional opinion, Naomi Richardson is legally capable of executing a will. She signed the form, stamped it with her official seal. The final legal hurdle was cleared. Mr. Crawford opened his laptop and began typing the text of the will. When he finished, he read it aloud, his voice formal and carrying the weight of legal authority. I, Naomi Richardson, of sound mind and memory, bequeath my entire estate as it belongs to me on the day of my death to Destiny Hayes. He looked up at me. Miss Richardson, are you aware that you are disinheriting your husband, Julian Garrett? Yes, I am aware. That is my express wish. Are you acting of your own free will? Without coercion or undue influence? Yes. I confirm. I looked directly at him, making sure there could be no doubt about my resolve. I am acting entirely of my own free will. I am of sound mind. I understand exactly what I am doing, and why I am doing it. My husband does not deserve one penny of what I've built, not one penny of what he murdered me for. Mr. Crawford nodded and printed the document with a portable printer he'd brought with him. Malcolm filmed the entire process with his phone camera, creating a video record that would be almost impossible to challenge in court. I signed the will with a trembling hand. Each letter took effort, but I made sure my signature was clear and unmistakable. Mr. Crawford affixed his notary seal and attested to the signing. The witnesses were Simone and a nurse from a nearby department whom Malcolm had brought in at the last minute. Someone with no connection to me or Julian, just an objective third party. When it was over, Mr. Crawford carefully placed the document in an envelope and sealed it. I will deposit this in the notary's office first thing tomorrow morning, he said. I will make certified copies and file them with the county clerk. Everything is absolutely legal. There is no longer any point of legal attack. This will is a fortress. I nodded, feeling my strength rapidly failing now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Malcolm leaned forward. Miss Richardson, I will handle the toxicology evidence. I'll request all your medical records and analysis reports. I'll contact the district attorney's office immediately. Julian Garrett will be held accountable for what he's done. I promise you that. Thank you, I whispered. That single word took everything I had left. Everyone began to file out. Mr. Crawford with his briefcase, Dr. Chambers with her evaluation, Simone with her tablet full of documentation, Malcolm with his phone and his recordings, and his righteous fury. Only Destiny remained. She stood by my bed, not knowing what to say. I could see she was overwhelmed, terrified, excited, all of it at once. Go home, I told her tiredly. Get some sleep. We'll see each other tomorrow. Maybe. And Destiny? Remember what you promised me. She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I won't forget, Miss Richardson. I swear I won't forget. She left quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I was alone again. I stared into the darkness outside my window and thought about what I'd just done. 3 days, maybe less, the doctor said. But I'd done it. I'd robbed Julian of the thing he killed me for. I'd taken his victory and turned it into ashes. That was the only thing that mattered now. Not the money, not the empire, not even justice, really, though that would be sweet. What mattered was that he wouldn't win. He wouldn't get to walk away with everything I'd built. He wouldn't get to enjoy the fruits of his murder. I felt no pain in that moment, only a deep, cold calm, a satisfaction that went bone deep. The revenge had given me more peace of mind than all my wealth ever had, more peace than all those years of building and acquiring and succeeding. In this final act of defiance, I'd found something I'd been missing my whole life. Purpose, real purpose. I died that night. Quietly, peacefully, without torment. The nurses found me in the morning when they came to check my vitals. My heart had simply stopped beating sometime around 3 in the morning. When Julian learned of my death, he burst into loud demonstrative tears in the hallway outside my room. I wish I could have seen it, the performance of a lifetime. The clinic staff, people he'd treated with barely concealed arrogance for 3 years, they all comforted him. They brought him tissues and coffee and soft words of sympathy. He thanked them with a trembling voice, pressing a handkerchief to his face. And behind that handkerchief, I know there were triumphant sparks dancing in his eyes. He thought he'd won. He thought his plan had worked perfectly. That morning started like a celebration for Julian Garrett. He sat in my office, the office he now considered his own, and went through my files like a king taking inventory of his kingdom. Property deeds, bank statements, lease agreements, investment portfolios, stock certificates. All this wealth spread before him like a feast. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of playing the devoted husband, 3 years of making tea every morning with poison in it and watching me drink it with a smile. And now? The reward was his. He'd already opened my safe the night before, right after the doctors pronounced me dead. Found the toxicology reports I'd ordered and dismissed them as nonsense. Just paranoid testing by an anxious woman. Nothing that would matter now that I was gone. He'd thoroughly checked my premarital asset status. Flawless. No community property, no joint accounts, everything in my name alone. Which meant, by law, as my husband with no will on file, he inherited everything. He leaned back in my leather chair, the one I'd sat in for 15 years while building my empire, and stretched like a cat in the sun. The smell of my perfume still lingered in the office. Chanel No. 5. But it didn't bother him anymore. It was the scent of his victory. Outside, it was a beautiful, clear October day. The leaves on the trees in my yard shone yellow and orange and red. Beautiful, perfect. Julian smiled. Life was finally settling into place exactly as he'd planned it. His phone vibrated on the desk. He looked at the screen and smiled wider. Vivienne Shaw, his mistress, the pharmacist he'd bribed and seduced and recruited into his murder plot. She'd been the one to procure the rare palliative care drug for him. She'd been the one to tell him exactly how much to use, how often, how to make it look like natural organ failure. Cold, pragmatic, ruthless. The only person in the world who shared his contempt for me. He answered with confidence in his voice. Yes, baby, how's it going? Great. Vivienne's voice came through cautious but eager. She died last night? She did. Quietly. No witnesses, no drama. The doctor said liver failure, just like we planned. No questions asked. Everything is safe. Everything is perfect. You're sure? No investigation? Absolutely. I calculated everything down to the last detail. The dose was minimal, spread out over months. The drug breaks down quickly in the system. By now there are hardly any traces left, even if someone did look. He laughed, feeling invincible. Even if they checked, they wouldn't find anything useful. I'm a genius, Viv. A genuine genius. Who looks for murder when a 49-year-old woman dies of organ failure? Nobody. It's the perfect crime. There was a pause on Vivian's end. She wasn't quite as confident as he was. And the will? She asked carefully. What about the will? What will? Julian laughed again. She didn't draw one up. I checked everything. I went through her entire home office, her safe, all her legal files. Nothing, not a single will on file anywhere. The entire estate is from before our marriage. She has no children, no direct heirs, which means by law, I inherit as her surviving spouse. The law is on my side, baby. We won. He could hear the relief in Vivian's voice. I hope you're right, Julian. I hope you thought of everything. Viv, don't be nervous. In 6 months, I'll have everything sorted out. I'll sell the medical centers to a hospital group. I already have buyers interested. I'll liquidate the commercial properties, convert everything to cash, and then we disappear. He continued, his voice dreamy with anticipation. We can go anywhere you want. Europe, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia. We'll have enough money for several lifetimes. We can open a boutique clinic in the Bahamas if you want. Just for ourselves, just for fun. We'll never have to work another real day in our lives. Vivian sighed, and he could hear the smile in her voice now. That sounds perfect. Just, be careful, okay? Take it slow. Play the grieving widower for a while. People need to believe you're devastated. I am a professional, Julian said, and there was arrogance in every word. Don't lecture me, baby. I've been playing a role for 3 years. I played it perfectly. Nobody suspects a thing. Nobody ever will. He hung up and walked to the cabinet where I'd kept my collection of expensive cognac. He poured himself a generous glass of Rémy Martin Louis XII, a bottle that cost $3,000 and that I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, this was a special occasion. His special occasion. He sipped it slowly, savoring the taste, and the victory, and the beautiful autumn day, and the life that was opening up before him like a flower. Everything in this house was excellent. The furniture, the art, the wine collection, the view from the windows. And now it all belonged to him. He felt like a king who had reclaimed his rightful throne after years in exile. There was a hard knock at the office door. Sharp, official sounding. Julian frowned slightly. The housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, a woman who'd served me for 20 years and who'd always looked at him with thinly veiled suspicion, entered without waiting for permission. Her eyes were red from crying. Real tears, unlike his fake ones. Mr. Garrett, she said, and her voice was cold. The attorney is here to see you, Malcolm Sterling. He says it's urgent, and he's not alone. Julian's frown deepened. Malcolm Sterling. That too smart, too observant lawyer who'd handled all my legal matters for the past 15 years. What did he want? Coming to settle his final bill? Coming to express condolences? Let him in, Julian said, setting down his cognac glass and arranging his face into an expression of grief. Malcolm Sterling walked into the office, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, but his face was hard, judgmental. There was no warmth in his eyes, no sympathy. He didn't offer his hand in greeting, just gave a curt nod. Mr. Garrett, my condolences. Thank you, Malcolm, Julian said, putting on his grieving widower voice. The voice that trembled slightly, that carried the weight of unbearable loss. This is such a tragedy. I'm devastated. Absolutely devastated. I don't know how I'll go on without her. He gestured to the cognac bottle. Would you like a drink? To calm your nerves? This must be difficult for you too, losing such an important client. No. Thank you, Malcolm said curtly. I need to discuss some legal matters with you. It cannot wait. Of course. Julian gestured to a chair, still playing the gracious, grief-stricken host. Please, sit down. Whatever you need. Malcolm sat without being asked and pulled a thin file folder from his briefcase. That folder looked innocuous, but somehow Julian felt a chill run down his spine looking at it. Naomi Richardson left a will, Malcolm said flatly. The room seemed to tilt. Julian felt his smile freeze on his face. Really? He tried to keep his voice casual, but it came out strained. When did she manage that? She was unconscious for days. The doctors said the medication, the entire estate that belonged to her at the time of her death has been bequeathed to another person, Malcolm continued, his voice emotionless and professional. Every property, every account, every asset. All of it goes to someone else. Silence. A silence that roared in Julian's ears like the ocean, like a tsunami about to crash over him and destroy everything. The realization hit him slowly at first, then, all at once, like falling off a cliff in slow motion, and then suddenly hitting the ground at full speed. "You mean?" Julian's voice came out thin, almost childlike. "You mean I'm not the heir, according to the will?" Miss Richardson disposed of her property as she saw fit, it was her legal right. Julian jumped to his feet, the mask of grief shattered completely, falling away to reveal the rage and panic underneath. "That's impossible," he shouted. "She was in a coma, she was unconscious. When could she possibly have drawn up a will? This is a trick, a forgery." Malcolm looked at him with cold, clinical detachment, like he was looking at an insect. "The will was drawn up one day before her death," he said calmly. "In the presence of a public notary, a psychiatric doctor who confirmed her full legal capacity, and multiple witnesses. Everything was filmed, everything was documented. Everything is absolutely lawful. We took every legal precaution imaginable," Malcolm continued. "We anticipated every possible challenge. This will is ironclad, Mr. Garrett, unbreakable." Julian felt his legs go weak. He gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "To whom?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "To whom did she leave it? Some cousin I've never heard of? A charity? A foundation?" Malcolm's eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. "That will be announced tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the notary's office. Your attendance is mandatory if you wish to hear the reading." "I will contest it," Julian screamed. He slammed his fist down on the desk, and the cognac glass jumped. She was not in her right mind, she was sick, dying. This is a farce. It's undue influence. We have a doctor's certificate confirming her full legal capacity at the moment of signing," Malcolm interrupted. "We have video documentation. We have the statements of a notary public and multiple unrelated witnesses. We have everything we need to prove that Naomi Richardson was of completely sound mind when she executed this will." Malcolm stood up, and Julian saw something in his expression that terrified him. It was knowledge, certainty. Like Malcolm knew something Julian didn't. She was mentally lucid, Mr. Garrett. Crystal clear. She knew exactly what she was doing, and more importantly, she knew exactly why she was doing it. Malcolm picked up his briefcase. "I strongly advise you to prepare yourself morally, and to hire your own attorney. You're going to need one. This will is a fortress. You cannot break it. You cannot challenge it. You cannot win." He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "See you tomorrow at 10, Mr. Garrett." He left without saying goodbye, without another word, just walked out and left Julian standing there in the office that was no longer his, surrounded by wealth that would never belong to him. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Julian stood there, breathing heavily. His perfect plan. His 3 years of patience, his calculated murder, all of it for nothing. A will. Naomi had drawn up a will. How? How had she managed it? She was supposed to be unconscious. The doctors said she was sedated. The nurses confirmed it. But somehow, some way, she'd outmaneuvered him. His hands were shaking as he grabbed his phone and dialed Vivian's number. She answered immediately. "Julian? What's wrong? You sound—" "We have a problem," he said. And his voice was barely controlled panic now. "A huge problem. The biggest problem imaginable." "What? What happened?" "Naomi tricked us. She left a will. She left everything to someone else. She must have known. She must have known what I was doing and she—" "That's impossible." Vivian's voice went shrill. "You said there was no will. You checked. You—" "I know what I said," Julian shouted. "But there is a will. A legal will. With witnesses and doctors and everything. Sterling just told me. He said it's unbreakable." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Vivian's voice, sharp and frightened. "To who? Who did she leave it to?" "I don't know yet. They're revealing it tomorrow at the notary's office. But Viv, if she knew about the poisoning and she left evidence." "She couldn't have," Vivian said, but there was doubt in her voice now. "The drug breaks down. You said there would be no traces. You said it was foolproof." "I thought it was," Julian whispered. He sank into the chair, his legs finally giving out completely. He thought of the toxicology reports he'd found in my safe. The ones he'd dismissed as paranoid nonsense. What if they weren't? What if I'd known? What if I'd documented everything? "Julian, if there's evidence." Vivian's voice was pure fear now. "If they can prove it was murder, we'll go to prison. I know," Julian said, his voice was hollow. "Dead. I know. We need to think," Vivian said, trying to pull herself together. We need to figure out who she left the estate to. We need to find a way to break that will. There has to be something. Some legal loophole. Some way to. Sterling said it's a fortress, Julian repeated dully. He said they documented everything. They have video footage. They have psychiatric evaluations. They have witnesses. He poured himself another glass of cognac with shaking hands. The room that had felt like a throne room just minutes ago now felt like a prison, a trap closing around him. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow we'll find out who she left everything to. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. But even as he said it, he knew. He'd lost. Naomi had reached from beyond the grave and stolen his victory. She'd taken everything he'd killed her for and given it to someone else. And there was nothing he could do about it. He hung up the phone and sat alone in that office, surrounded by wealth that would never be his. The woman he'd murdered had somehow won. But what Julian didn't know, what he wouldn't find out until the next morning when he walked into that notary's office and saw who Naomi had left everything to, was that the will was just the beginning. Because I hadn't just stolen his inheritance. I'd made sure the toxicology reports were already in the hands of the district attorney. I'd made sure Malcolm had filed a formal complaint with the police. I'd made sure that by the time Julian found out who inherited my estate, there would already be detectives looking into my death. The will was my revenge. But justice? That was coming too. If you want to know what happened when Julian walked into that notary's office, when he found out that everything I'd built went to a cleaning woman he'd never even noticed, when the police came knocking with questions about the poison in my system, make sure you're subscribed to Revenge Sparkle, because part 2 is coming soon. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Julian Garrett deserves what's coming to him? Do you think my revenge was justified? See you in the next one.